So what I want to take you through really is just how we got involved, where we've got to, and also the sorts of things that we've been looking at that actually might be something that you want to discuss in the future, both with the club, with us, and whoever else you want to talk to. That there are certainly things here that will promote discussion. But one of the things that we've looked at doing is just being a bit more open about how we've come towards the development of the scheme. And what that's actually done is try to understand what the key drivers for the project have been in the past and actually make sure that those are being delivered now. So just a quick kind of idea about what we want to say. That's very difficult to read, I do apologise, but basically it's who are KSS and who are Buckingham, so I'll show you a couple of projects that we've done. Andy's talked about most of them. How we've got to this point, and obviously what we're doing in the future. What we've done in terms of revising the proposal, so you'll see some of the new spaces that might have gone in there, things that you might not be familiar with, but certainly that will promote discussion in the next few hours this evening. And also some of the key spaces that are really driven by what the fan might experience when they turn up. So it's key spaces, it's not everything, but it's certainly something that will actually drive a better understanding about where we're coming from and actually help you feed back to the club. So who are KSS? Well, KSS are one of the leading sports architects. We sit alongside Buckingham's. Buckingham's actually employ us, so we're employed by the contractor, not by the club at this stage. So we're working for one of the leading stadium contractors, and you've got one of the leading stadium architects working together. It's not the first project we've done. So we've done the Amex. This was a two-phase project, taking it from 22,000 in the first phase. 1 year later, they decided they wanted to actually install another 8,000 seats, taking it just over 30,000. We did their training ground together. We're currently in the process of extending that by another few thousand square metres to take them really up into where the Premier League training grounds really are these days. And we've just finished 2 phases of this. So this is the first phase of the National Indoor Arena in Dublin, and the second phase is a set of indoor playing pitches, so football and rugby. And the rugby side is actually for the RFU, so we're actually doing the RFU training centre as part of our scheme there. So how do we get here? Well, you've got a planning application, ultimately, that was submitted alongside other architects as part of a master plan for the housing development, and you have a part of that site, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But you'll be familiar with these images, and really this is your destination, and what we're looking at is the first step on that part of the journey. So really it's to do with the West Stand, and also how do you stepping stone your way without compromising anything that you want to do in the future. So that takes me on to what we've actually done. What have we actually done that's different? Well, we started from first principles, ultimately, that's what we had to do. And first principles for the scheme were that you have a site that is bounded on all 4 sides. It's either bounded on sides with existing infrastructure or existing properties, so that UK Power Networks and some of the industrial sites to the north, they exist. But you're also bounded by future development, which is the Galliard scheme. So anything that Galliards are doing is impacting on what you have as a site. And primarily from a stadium perspective, there are a few things that we need to look at. One of them is access. So typically for the West Stand, so this is the West Stand here. Typically for the West Stand, we need access from large vehicles, primarily coaches, but also vehicles to deliver goods for both hospitality and also the concourses, plus rubbish and waste extract, all those sorts of things. They all need to be done and driven through the site. So you would, if you'd seen the planning application information, you would have seen some of that. Overlaid on that is a complication here, and if anybody can see that yellow line is basically part of the Galliard scheme includes some mixed use retail, and that has a specific provision to be able to access that from the rear. So as part of the scheme that we've had to develop, we've had to allow for access over the stadium site into that particular part of the property. So we haven't been able to remove any of these items. This is a particular overlap. On top of that, because of the particular constraints on the site, we need to get spectators in and out of the ground, and ultimately things like the, closed boundaries are quite difficult things to do. So ultimately we're trying to get 5,000 or 6,000 people into some of these areas, and we're trying to do that through relatively confined spaces. So the whole design has to take account of the fact that there are upwards of 10,000 in the first phase and up to 20,000 when you complete on site, coming through a relatively modest number of entrances. So we haven't been able to throw all of that away and say, let's start again. We've had to take all that into account. The key entrance, as far as the first phase is concerned, is down on this corner, because a permanent main stand is going to have effectively a permanent capacity. The temporaries you can play with a little bit, but ultimately that's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to work out the best way to get people in and out. So this is probably new to you. The stand design fundamentally hasn't changed. It's a West Stand facility, so that means it's got the hospitality in it, and it's got all the players' facilities and all those sorts of things. What may have changed is that primarily is the actual footprint. So anything that you might have seen in the past may have had big roads going through the middle and all those sorts of things. But one of the things that we looked at from first early doors was to say, what is the most efficient design that you can get on the site that gives you the maximum usage for this particular stand? Because this is your starting point. If you're compromising your starting point, then down the line, you're going to have to try and unwind that. So we wanted to make sure that we got absolutely everything into this particular stand that you needed at this particular point in time. Now, one thing that people may notice, and there's a couple of things on the slide which may or may not be apparent to people, is that at this point here, we have a potential extension to the ground. So the scheme has been designed up to this point for a full West Stand, as if this became a bowl coming all the way around. Now, from a cost perspective, we haven't been able to include all of that stand at this particular point in time. And again, this is one of the things that I think you're going to be discussing later. But ultimately, we have a design that takes you up to here to complete the West Stand as a full scheme. Taking this away doesn't compromise the usage of the stand at all. It just changes the capacity slightly and tweaks some of the facilities. The eagle eye will see potentially that there are a couple of options that we're discussing in terms of how do we maintain a capacity of 9,500 to 10,000. There are two options at the moment that we're considering. One is blocks of stands, so stands that allow a condensed area for spectators, and an alternative is to do a low rise, sort of 7 or 8 row mini bowl, as it were. So we're looking at those now in terms of how they work out and how they are costed. Obviously, anything that's longer has a bigger roof, and the bigger the roof, the more expensive it is. So there's some back and forth on that we're looking at, and that's part of the ongoing discussions with Buckingham's and the club at the moment. Just to show you sort of what that means, is that's the current stand design. I'll come on to that in a minute. But a temporary stand with about 15 rows, which ultimately would be the same design in all areas, would look something like that. And the alternative is that you might go to something like 7 or 8 rows that gets you a bowl that wraps all the way around, so you have a fully enclosed ground. Now, that might be something that you as the fan base might want to discuss with the club in terms of how you actually want to spectate the games. And certainly any feedback is welcome. What we'll do with Buckingham's and the club is feedback to you where the cost lies with all those sorts of things. So from the main stand perspective, again, this hasn't fundamentally changed from where you were with the previous scheme. What this has done is really maximise the efficiency of the row. So we've managed to get additional capacity in that lower level. We've also added 2 rows of seating to the hospitality level. The original scheme, if anybody had studied it carefully, would have seen 2 rows at that level. And in doing that, what that means is that anybody who's a paying hospitality customer up at this level doesn't have to move through the stand to find their seat, which actually at the time was something that you had to do. If you were a hospitality customer from another part of the ground, you would have to come down the stairs and sit in the seats at the back here, which we didn't think was a great idea. So the principle of that is that we're designed for over 1,000 at this level, but just cutting the building short, we've lost a couple of hundred hospitality seats at that level. And then we have the top floor, which has a bit of hospitality included in the design, but ultimately it's a future fit-out phase, which is, again, as it was intended in the first place, but it allows you to expand in some of the hospitality areas should that part of your offer need to grow. So from the floor plans, I've highlighted basically everything that is spectator-driven as opposed to the sort of running of the club to some degree. So everything from this line here, from the south end of the pitch forwards is spectator-driven, and everything back from there to the north in the west stand is operations. So it's bits of the press and some elements of the ground staff over here, players and officials in the middle, the stadium operations. So we won't focus on that. We've reorganised bits of the front of this. So originally this was just a hospitality entrance and not a lot more. We've reorganised this to bring the club shop over, so the club shop isn't a temporary facility, it's part of the main stand, it's part of the spectator experience as you actually approach the ground. It does include the hospitality entrance, so those two are linked together, and that has some operational benefits that the club might find. And we've also included a museum and a sort of expansion space should that want to be taken forwards. The key thing that we have changed, so what this plan doesn't show is actually where the boundary is, but the boundary line is along here. So the road is only wide enough to take the truck or the bus or whatever it happens to be that passes through there. We haven't got a load of excess space which was on the previous design. And what we've ultimately done is we've taken all of that space and we've put it into a new fan zone here at this ground floor. And that's a fan zone that gets shared by both West Stand customers that come up onto the concourse there, and also anybody who's on the South Stand. So this is the foot of a staircase. You have to excuse how we describe staircases sometimes. But that's the foot of a staircase that allows you to come from the first floor down into a fan bar, or from the South Stand at level access into the same position. So you've got a mix of crowd in that location. And we, in talking to the club, we've looked at what the options for that might be, and that might be a brewery-based offer. Which could be a really nice tie-up. So again, the principles of the first floor haven't changed. It's coming onto a linear concourse with effectively emergency egress at the north, but coming up into this position. And this is the top of the staircase. So you come up into a space that is a large open fan congregation area. And what we've done is we've pushed this pay line, the turnstile line, forwards. And there's the opportunity to move it even further forwards if we wanted to get more space on the concourse. We've pushed that forwards to give you as much space on the concourse as possible. And then that level has interaction with the floor below. So there's quite a nice way that you could actually move through the ground here. One of the other things that we've proposed for discussion, if you want to change it, is that this corner is glazed. So as you come up into the concourse, you actually look all the way through and out into the ground. So there are some positives to that and some negatives to that. So for the drinkers in the room, you can't drink here. You have to drink down here. It has to be effectively a dry area, but the point being that if you want to go and drink, you can go drink downstairs in the fan bar below. For discussion, I'll leave that to, if anybody's got tomatoes or whatever, Joe will pick them up in a minute. Going through the rest of the levels then. So the first floor of hospitality, again, it's fundamentally similar to how it was designed before. Primarily it's boxes, hospitality suites, and conferencing facilities that double up on a match day for hospitality. On this end, if the way that we're referring to them as the last three grid lines of the ground are built, this would have another hospitality suite of about 120 people. This one's around 150 odd or so. And then you've still got 500 or so capacity for that conferencing facility. Those are double height spaces. So on this floor, there's a big void that sits over there that allows you to do, ultimately do conferencing in that area. And one of the things that we introduced, because we didn't like the idea really that you didn't have a complete bowl on this corner, was a mezzanine level here that allows corner viewing from that excuse me, corner viewing from that level, but it also gives you a split level for you to do different types of banqueting. So if you know, for the romantics in the room, you can have a 4-piece orchestra or string quartet playing up there while somebody gets married or something like that. Nobody romantic? Anyway, so some of these spaces then. So just really quickly, this is just sort of just look and feel really. So the idea being that we still keep the main hospitality reception at this at the main entrance area. That is currently off the club shop. There's opportunity to move the entrance if we need to, but ultimately it's quite a nice thing to be able to do to have people interacting in that area. Museum and an expansion space or storage space if that's what we want, but also a direct avenue into a fan zone, so you can come through the shop, ticketed area, straight into the fan zone. Brewery offer, it sounds like I've been drinking, brewery offer in this location which allows all of that to operate as one single offer. And there are a few things here that go through. So this is the shop that we did for Brighton. Just a look and feel for something that is not excessively expensive. It kind of does all the things that it needs to do, but it's certainly something that you need to start thinking about what these things look like. So into the fan zone, so this is a 3D cutaway. That is not the extent of what we're building. It's not a representation of what's on site at the moment. It's just 3D cutaway from our model to our 3D model that we build in. So this is taken off the second floor, looking into that main concourse area that you come up to. That's the staircase that goes down into the floor below, and this is the glazed corner. So fans coming up from this location into a very large concourse sort of gathering space, and feeding off down to the concourse if they're sat in the centre of the stand. But the opportunity to come down into an underground fan zone is quite an interesting idea. And we would, we'd encourage you, again, look and feel an idea about how, this is Wembley. Wembley have done something there. We did this for them. But brewery themes are a little bit more kind of steampunky type of thing. Anybody knows what that means? But that type of aesthetic is something that might work quite nicely. It's not just about that zone though. So there's a few other things. This is what we did at Liverpool. So we did Liverpool's new main stand, and a kind of slightly more industrial aesthetic for how the main concourses look. And the idea behind that really is that you're spending the money that is where it's visible, and you can tailor it quite quickly to either club events, and you can also look at how you let out spaces like that as well. Similarly for boxes, an idea about how boxes can be done expensively in some respects, but also slightly more simply. And also looking at different types of hospitality offer. So, I mean, these are aspirational images. I'm not suggesting this is what you're going to do at day one, but these are the sorts of things that you need to think about as you go down a route, because it's the sort of thing that you can start to build in now. That's more hospitality, that's more Wembley. And the reason I ended on hospitality there is to give you, again, this is a cutaway of our model that shows you how that internal two-storey space might look at the main hospitality level, to give you your main conferencing facility. So this space can be divided in two through a line through here, and it has that balcony space and access to a further set of seats. And this is how we did it at Brighton. So Brighton is conference mode, wedding mode with a string quartet, and obviously different event modes. I don't know how they managed to get a load of red in there, but somebody obviously did it for a joke. Thanks very much.